First of all, I hope that through my presentation I will give you the private sector view on what's happening here, because we are a private sector organization. We're not an NGO or a government entity whatsoever. As he said before, my background, originally I was doing PPPs in the ICT area in Europe. And now I'm doing PPPs in power, so I can maybe give you some insights on why they're different, which I think was raised earlier. And our organization, Good Earth Power, just to give you a very brief background, we're relatively new. We were started in the Middle East, and the idea was to hit the kind of the dream, which is long-term sustainable growth and development. And the approach we took was to acquire technologies which are all too good to be true, that are all developed in the West, rolled out extensively in Europe or the United States or Japan, but not rolled out in the developing world, and to take those and roll them out primarily in Africa. And they're mainly infrastructure and power, so roads, rail, telecommunications technologies, etc. The focus here obviously is on power, and what I'd like to do is just share my experience to date, particularly in Africa, as we roll out power plants in Africa. So what I'll touch on is what are the challenges that we've found in financing power and green technologies, in particular in Africa. Then the responsibilities as we see it of the partners, right? And there's really four partners that we see. The IPP, there's the government, financiers, and institutions. And then I'm going to give you a case study on Mozambique, actually, and Zambia, which I think are both represented here today of what we're doing there. So I guess our view, the main challenges in the African PPP sector, power sector. First of all, green technologies are not the status quo. So there's been a lot of talk today, for example, about hydro, which I guess is a green technology of sorts. But there hasn't been a lot of talk about solar or wind or any of the quote-unquote new technologies. Governments and institutions and financiers tend to focus on what they know. So, for example, I saw earlier today Agreco's share price was put up there on the screen. And, this is a company that's been around and doing a number of things in the kind of hydrocarbon area for a while. But proven technologies have some issues. So first of all, implementation timelines. We've talked about a lot of large hydro projects that will be ready in 5 years or 10 years or 12 years, even one was mentioned, where there's a need today in Africa. And how do we develop that for the needs today? Also, environmental policies. We can get certain coal-based power plants up and running in 2 or 3 years. But of course that doesn't meet some of the regulatory environmental requirements. And we haven't really talked that much about kind of off-grid capabilities and rural electrification, although we touched upon it briefly in the last couple of presentations. Green technologies address some of those, but unfortunately they have their own challenges. Most of them are subscale, and therefore they're marginal in discussions. It's part of the reason why they haven't been raised really today. You don't hear about 500 megawatt, what you do for solar perhaps, but it's too expensive. But you don't hear about 500 megawatt power plants in most of the green areas. Also, they're still being developed in the West, and the tariffs in the West are established and they're high. So I, as an investor, why would I go to Africa, deal with some of the challenges that we face in Africa, get a lower tariff or a non-existent tariff and negotiate for 4 or 5 months when I can still take the low-hanging fruit in Europe and get very high tariffs. Governments are still looking for free implementations. So a lot of the governments we talk to are very progressive. We've been very fortunate in that respect, but we have heard some war stories about people still looking for things that are free, or they're looking for concessionary loans, or they're looking for World Bank support, which is fine. But they're usually tied to the kind of old guard or the established power. They're not tied to kind of new technologies or new-ish technologies. And so I guess what we try to do is to identify how we can overcome some of these challenges and deliver large-scale green technology projects in Africa and other places like India, etc. A lot of people take it and say, what does the government need to do? We went the opposite. We're not a government. We're a private sector. We're not represented. We don't represent the United States, even though I'm from the United States, or China, or the Middle East, where we're headquartered, or any of that. And we said we need to take the responsibility to put all the pieces together to meet the government's needs. And if we can't do that, then we shouldn't complain. And so we said we need to have the right technology. It needs to be clean and green. We're not an oil company. It needs to be the right price. There's no point in arguing about tariffs and trying to get 20 cents per kilowatt hour. It's just not sustainable. So you have to find a technology that will allow you to sell at a price that people can afford. And I think that's the biggest thing we found on tariffs. It's really about affordability. We've got some interesting models that I'll share with you about how to overcome what if they're making too much money, that type of thing. Favorable implementation timelines. South Africa is here, and you guys need power today. I know you have 21 or 23 people on your IPP list for delivery by 2014, and my understanding is not a single one will actually deliver very much energy by 2014. And you need someone to deliver energy now. It can't wait. You need a proven track record. There's no point in going to Africa for your first power plant. Right? I mean, it's just not going to work. You know, you need to have delivered it somewhere else first. It's not fair to say you're going to deliver a pilot plant in Africa. Second is you need an insurance package. You need an insurance package. If I'm going to ask for a sovereign guarantee from a government, I need to provide a guarantee that I'm going to deliver. Right? So there's no point in a partnership, me asking for a guarantee from one side if I'm not also going to provide a guarantee. So you have to line up your financial guarantees and your delivery guarantees. It must be scalable, right? So, you know, with the best will in the world, 40,000 megawatt hydropower plant in 12 years, unbelievable. That'll be fantastic. But can I start with something now, today, and have it grow, bite it off in chunks that people can afford? You know, maybe the government of Nigeria doesn't want to give a sovereign guarantee for a $5 billion project, but it may do a $50 million, and if that's successful, 3 months later, $50 million more, and then $100 million more, etc. And you need an EPC partner. So we're a new company. We're 11 months old, but you know, we're not building our own power plants. We went out and got people like Balfour Beatty and Mott MacDonald to agree to build all of our power plants for us. Right? So there's no point in us going to an African government saying, oh, we're going to go build a bunch of power plants. But when I bring Mott MacDonald with me, then it's a different story. So these are some of the things that we put in place to make sure that when we go to government or private sector, we can deliver directly to industry. We don't have to go to government. We can say, here's a complete package of something to deliver. Now what we want, though, is we need support from governments to do this. And as I said, we've been very lucky in the governments that we've interacted with so far. We've been very forward-thinking. First, our view is you do need to provide a government guarantee. And the reason is we're not collecting the money from whoever's paying the electricity bill. You are. And if you are collecting the money, then you've got to make sure we get paid, because that's what we're basing and building our power generation plant on. And at the same time, as I said, I'll bring my guarantees. I will give a performance guarantee. I'll give an EPC guarantee. But if I do that, I need you also to give a guarantee. The alternative is for me to do end-to-end service provision, which won't really work. I'm not a transmitter, and I'm not a distributor. I've got technology in power generation. On tariffs, a lot of things have been said today about tariffs. Our view is publish refit tables and see if people can deliver to them. Whatever you can afford. If it's 6 cents or 8 cents or 10 cents, you'd be surprised what technologies are out there and what you can deliver to. Our cost is quite low, and therefore we can deliver within easily the published tariff or almost published refit tariff of South Africa. And then you should implement a social scorecard to catch excess profit. If you're worried about private sector organizations going in and making too much money, tell them 50% or 80% of their profits over a certain level go towards social reinvestment programs. Just think out of the box. How can you catch it without delaying 4 months to actually come up with a tariff that you think makes sense? And also, you can't have standardized tariffs be the only tariffs. In other words, new technologies are going to be invented, and what you don't want to do is lock yourself out from new technologies. So you need to have exceptions to the rule and have a team like a PPP division be prepared to review new technologies. We're always looking at new technologies ourselves. We think we have a couple of great technologies in power, but we're not going to stop looking because there's going to be more that are going to be developed. If you're worried about someone, but you still think they have a great technology, just introduce them to another partner that you do know and trust. So maybe Agreco can actually be introduced to some new wind technology or solar technology or whatever, and they'll be the ones to roll it out, which we think is something sensible. And we're certainly happy to share our technology with other people. Our business is about developing. It's not about, kind of dominating the world. Create an entity to share the responsibility of corralling government entities. This is the biggest point. So we've signed some interesting MOUs and agreements, in Zambia, Mozambique, and so on. And the biggest struggle for us is just corralling all the different stakeholders that we actually need to engage with. So we can build a power plant in 6 months' time, but it's going to take me 9 months or a year or 15 months just to engage on all the different levels that I need to engage with the municipalities and the regulator and the Ministry of Energy and the Director of Electricity and the Director for Renewable Energy and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So having someone from government who will actually work with you hand in hand, which should be the PPP unit if they're not too busy, is something that we would find very helpful. We have power plants up and running in Germany, Japan, India, right? So if we can build a power plant in India, which is a developing world country, which has some of the similar characteristics of a place like Africa, and I can put power plants in residential areas in Germany, which is very strict, you should pretty much think that it would be okay for me to deliver a power plant in Africa. And what we want to do is just bring the people of the governments of Africa to our power plants in other countries so they can see them. And then once they see them, then say, let's do an EIA, but under the understanding that we've already done all the EIAs in all these other places. And then focus on self-funding sound projects and don't let anything stop you. So, it doesn't have to be a concessionary loan, although those are nice, but if there's a commercial project that makes money within a set tariff, it should be fine, right? You should be happy to proceed. The tariff is where you need to be focused, and let us decide how we actually implement on those tariffs, as long as we're providing the insurance and the guarantees, which of course we would. Financiers and institutions, obviously many of the people in this room, how do we roll this out on a wide-scale basis? So one, if you're a fieldstone and you find a technology that's incredible, you should actually go hand in hand to government, go to the meetings with the government and the technology provider right from the beginning, right? That gives comfort to government that, there's the financial package there already. They don't have to waste time. Is there financing behind this or not? And of course, you're in a position to push governments to allow time to conclude project finance. We're shortlisted on a bid in Kenya. And, the first thing they did is, can we have proof of funds? So we had to have our bankers go ahead and send them the letter. But it's not really how they do things in the West, if you know what I mean, right? So in the West, it's assumed that if you have a viable product and you're insuring it and you've got a global EPC partner, that there will be project financing behind it. And that's something that we think needs to shift in Africa. Regional development agencies to share learnings across regions, right? So, obviously I'm leading a company, so it's in my interest. I will certainly share learnings across countries, but even SAPP should be informed about some of the things that we're doing in places like Zambia and Mozambique. We've obviously been recently entered into discussions in South Africa, but there's no reason why they can't introduce us to other people as well, not just us, but any company that's doing interesting things. Donors, invest capital on behalf of governments, but use subordinated loans or things of that nature, where you're going to get a return, and then you can reinvest more. Don't necessarily have to sink it into holes. And World Bank, obviously, you've already touched on the partial risk guarantee, so fantastic. Just a quick case study, just what we're doing in both Mozambique and Zambia. So it's large-scale staged development of 1,500 to 2,000 megawatts. Pick a country, choose the number. It includes rural electrification. So our technology can be used off the grid. And we're using what we call the Robin Hood approach to get around this whole tariff issue, which is we know there are some industry players, like mining companies, for example, they're an easy target, who will pay higher tariffs and buy in very large quantities our energy And we agree with government as a partner that we will share the benefits of that and allow them to subsidize local consumption. Social reinvestment. As a rule, everywhere we go, not just in power, but in all of our projects, we reinvest 50% of our profits into social programs sponsored by government, whether it's health, education, more power, doesn't matter to us. And we bring the technology, capability, financing, insurance, scalability, job creation, social investment, and the desire. And what we want is to find government partners that want to use that. But we wouldn't, if we find that there's something that a government needs, it's our responsibility to go meet that need. It's not the government's responsibility. We have to go do that. And that's us.